In WPF, animation is the process of changing a property over time. Let's create a new application called animation. And to get started, we'll create a canvas. And within that canvas, we'll create an ellipse. Give the ellipse a name and position the ellipse, which is actually a circle, in the upper left-hand corner. To animate this, we want to modify its position over time. Let's turn to the code behind, and we're going to do this animation entirely in C#. The value that we're going to animate is the canvas left property. That's of type double, and thus we will use a double animation, adding in the necessary header file, and we'll call our double animation animation. The way you work with double animations is to set the from and to value. Since we'll be working with the top left property, that is the left offset, we're going to set the from to 0. We want to animate so that the circle moves 450 pixels to the right. And so we will set the to value to 450. All we need to do now is to call begin animation on the ellipse, and that method takes two parameters. The first is the property we're going to set, which in this case is canvas left property. And the second argument is our double animation. When we run this application, our ellipse starts on the far left and very quickly animates across to the far right. That animation happened a bit quickly because the default time on an animation is 1 second. But we can change that by changing the animation duration property. We do that by creating a new duration, and duration's constructor wants a time span, and we will have that time span create the amount of time for the duration by parsing a string, and we provide it with hours, minutes, and seconds. The net effect of this is that we have set the animation duration to 5 seconds. Let's run the application again, and this time the circle moves across the same amount, but over the course of 5 seconds. Notice that the animation is a linear interpolation. That is, it is going to break up the animation evenly across whatever its duration is. There are some other properties we can set on the animation. For example, we can set the auto reverse property to true. And now when we run our animation, it will traverse across the entire length in 5 seconds, and then take another 5 seconds to go back where it came from. A final property worth taking a look at is that you can set the repeat behavior on your animation. The repeat behavior also wants a time span, and that's how long it's going to repeat its behavior for. Since I want this to go across, which is 5 seconds, and back, a total of 10 seconds, twice, I'm going to set this for 20 seconds. And when we run the application, it will do one complete cycle, that is with the auto reverse equal true, and then it will continue in its repeat behavior until 20 seconds is exhausted, which is the time it takes to go back and forth twice. Let's create a new animation application. Normally, rather than writing our animations in C#, we will write them declaratively. The heart of a declarative animation is a storyboard. To see this at work, let's begin by creating a button. And notice that I have used button open and closing tags. That's because within the button, I'm going to create a trigger. Visible controls can have triggers, and I do that by setting the button triggers collection. Inside that, I'm going to create an event trigger, which will fire on an event, as you might expect, And so I need to tell it the routed event it's going to fire on, and in this case, it's the click event. Within that, we need to create an actions collection, and within that, we can create our storyboard. The first element that we're going to add is a begin storyboard, so that when we fire this trigger, we begin the storyboard that's contained within it. And the storyboard needs to know its target property, and that's going to be the width of the button. Within the storyboard, we place our double animation, but this time we do so declaratively. As we did in the code, we give it a from value. In this case, we'll set the from value to be 30, the initial width of the button. A to value, how wide do we want our button to become? And then we can set the duration, and here we can set it as a simple string, so 4 seconds. And we can set auto reverse equal to true. That's all it takes. We've now added this storyboard to the trigger for this button. When we run the application and click on the button, it grows out to its wide size and auto reverses back to its normal size. This approach used what is known as linear interpolation with a standard double animation. There is an alternative to that, which is keyframe animation. In keyframe animation, you identify a value at a specific time. To see that, let's begin by taking out the storyboard that we have. And in the event trigger actions, we're going to put a begin storyboard, and then we're going to put a storyboard, but with no particular target identified yet. And now we will add a double animation using keyframes. And for each animation type, in this case double animation, there is a paired double animation using keyframes. We will identify here what the target property is. Storyboard.targetProperty equal to width. And at the same time, we can set the duration. Within our double animation using keyframes, we can set various types of keyframes, the most common of which is a linear double keyframe. We set the value that we want at a particular time, and we set the key time, that is the time at which we'll be at that value. So we're going to set that to 0 seconds. At 0 seconds, we want the value to be 30. We can then set the next time and value pair. So if we were to set the linear double keyframe value equal to 40 at 1 second, then it will do a linear interpolation between 0 time and 1 second to expand by 10 pixels. If in the next second we ask it to expand considerably more, we set the value equal to 200, and the key time we set to 2 seconds. Then it has to expand not 10 pixels in a second, but 160 pixels in that second. And there's the value of using the keyframes. We have much more precise control over this animation. And what we should see is that it starts off slow and then rapidly increases speed for the second. Let's run that. We click on the button, the first second is slow, and the second is much faster. So far we've been doing all this work in Visual Studio, but as noted in the previous demo, it's much easier to work with animations in Blend. Let's take a fast look at what you can do in Blend with animations. When our new project comes up, we have a blank canvas. Let's go over to our shapes, pick an ellipse, draw the ellipse, come over to the properties for the ellipse, pick a color. Let's scroll down the properties and set the width and height to the same value of 50, giving us a circle. We can now switch into animation view, which is just a different way to arrange the workspaces. So we'll go to Window, Workspaces, Animation, as opposed to Windows, Workspaces, Design. They're just different ways of arranging the windows. Animation gives us more of a view of the objects in timeline, which is what we want. Here's our ellipse. We're going to say, please add a timeline. We'll call that timeline ellipse movement. That just gives it a name. And notice here we have a timeline with time increments currently set to quarter seconds. And you can zoom in and zoom out on that and so forth. We can create a keyframe animation by simply recording a keyframe at point 0, then moving the ellipse where we want it to be at 1 second. Let's set the timeline to 1 second and move the ellipse straight down. Record that keyframe, move the timeline to 2 seconds, and of course we could put interim values, and let's move our ellipse up and over. Record that keyframe, go to 3 seconds, come back down at an angle, record the keyframe, go to 4 seconds, bring it back up. We can even play that animation before we run the application and see if it's what we want. When we're done, we can click this red dot to end recording, and now we have an application that we can run. It comes up, and there's our animation. You can see that was extremely easy to build. Let's take a look at the code that supports that. Here's our storyboard with the name, ellipse movement. Here's our double animation using keyframes, setting the various target properties. And the keyframes with the times and the values that correspond to the positioning we gave it. So quite a bit of XAML was produced, but it was produced in a way that was very easy because we did that visually in Blend. Blend is an extremely powerful tool for visual design and especially for animation.